Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Menachem Creditor. It's my honor to serve as scholar in residence and rabbi for UJA Federation of New York. We bring you Torah and music blessing and community every weekday. We've been doing so since March 18th, 2020. Today it is July 24th, 2025. That's almost 5.5 years of Torah every single weekday morning, finding each other from around the world to say good morning to each other. Arlene, it's good to see you. Rabbi Wasser, so nice to see you, my friend. Michael, welcome. Linda, good to see you. Hope that everyone is safe and well. Rosa and Arlene, Diane, good to see you. Let's see who else is here so we can say good morning to each other for a moment before we sing a bracha and learn some Torah. Jerry and Jonathan, Linda and Sharon, Barbara, Boker Tov, good to see you. Hope that all of you are doing well. Hi, Cecile. Welcome. Stanley, nice to see you. Thank you, Penny. It is broadcast 1352. Adrian, nice to see you, my friend. Peter and Dale, good to see you. Rabbi Cantor, Risa, Boker Tov. Debbie, good morning. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Ron. Let's take a breath. We'll sing a bracha, learn some Torah. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Hope that you and yours are safe and well. It's broadcast 1352. Thanks, Penny. And it is day 657 since October 7th. We are reading a double Torah portion, Mattot-Massei. And I'll confess that often I try to find the positive from within each week's Torah portion or Torah portions. And I try to amplify the messages that I think will do good in the world. Over the last 657 days, that's become even more urgent and important, and it is also complicated because the parshiot that we have, the Torah portions, are not only the good news. And therefore, I have an obligation as a student of Torah and as someone who is honest to include the parts that are not so simple and point in a direction that, at the very least, is hard. In this week's Torah portion, there's a section in chapter 31 of the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers, which is God's command to Moshe. This is verse 2 of chapter 31. Nikom nikmat b'nei Israel me'et hamidyanim achar te'asef elamecha. Seek vengeance, the vengeance of the children of Israel from the Midianites. Afterward you will be gathered to your kinspeople. Now, Moshe knows that his life will end before the people enter the land. And he is told, commanded by God, that first to seek vengeance. And the word is not justice, it's nikama. And of course, the Torah has its own perspective, and there are tribal truths that we try to fight in an ecumenical intention, trying to find every possibility of interfaith connectivity and love. The work that I've been doing for UJA, with UJA, with interfaith clergy missions. One of them will be leaving this coming October with clergy of different faiths from Long Island to Israel. This is a beautiful attempt to build friendship and relationship where the Torah probably couldn't even imagine such a thing would be possible. But the need of the Torah, I wouldn't say the need of God, but the need of the Torah to put vengeance into the heart of Moshe, only after which would Moshe join his ancestors. Right? Before his life's mission is complete, this was important enough to include. I say that because, just speaking very personally today, it's a hard day for me. I've been looking at Facebook memories, and I'm sure, friends, you do this once in a while too, either with actual physical photos or with some digital version of this, looking back at what happened on this day, however many years ago. I saw this very powerful image from 2 years ago, sitting arm in arm with my beloved friend and teacher, Yossi Klein Halevi. I hope that you have had a chance to learn from him, to read his words, his books, hear him on podcasts from the Shalom Hartman Institute. One of his most important books is Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor. He wrote letters as if he had a Palestinian neighbor that he could speak with, trying to just share his own story. And what is amazing about Yossi and the reach that he has is that Palestinians ended up receiving this book and responding to him, and then he and they had a dialogue that he included in the second edition of the book. Very powerful. But 2 years ago, he and I were sitting arm in arm outside of the Supreme Court in Israel, where there were decisions being made by the Knesset to undo the powers of the Supreme Court to protect democracy. This was a huge protest movement that has faded in our memories since that day. And if only we knew 2 years ago. 2 years ago, there was a phrase I saw in a store window 2 years ago that said, Milchemet ha'atzmaut hashniya, the second war of independence. That's how severe these threats to Israeli democracy felt to 10% of Israel's population, who showed up, 10% of Israel's entire population every Saturday night for 10 months. And so here I am remembering those urgent feeling days, and they are urgent. They remain deeply urgent within Israeli politics these days. And if only I knew. I wrote a poem about how I was born after some wars and before other wars, with a picture of that Milchemet ha'atzmaut hashniya, the Second Independence War. And I wrote that in July of 2023. If only, well, I couldn't have known. I just didn't know. And then I looked earlier in time, 11 years ago today. This is where it starts to get a little bit rougher. And then, Fabrice, I will be addressing what you're sharing. 11 years ago today, I had just returned from a mission to Israel. I was leading a group of progressive rabbinic Zionists from the United States on a trip to Israel. And if you remember the summer of 2014, hundreds and hundreds of rockets were being fired from Gaza into Israel. That wasn't happening until the moment we landed. So we were going on a mission, and as we landed, the missiles started flying, and obviously everything about the trip ended. The first speaker we had on that trip was actually Yossi Klein Halevi, who said, we need you diaspora rabbis, because here in Israel, we are fighting a daily fight for our existence. But you in America, you have enough of a distance that you can think in the long term, which we cannot do. And I think that was a little bit of hyperbole. Israel's strategic capacity certainly has been restored over the last 657 days, and the ability to think strategically far surpasses anything I can possibly imagine. But I returned from Israel and shared what I had been through myself, because during this trip, there were a lot of red alerts, Tzeva Adom. And I remember, I was going to say, I remember like it's yesterday, but I actually remember like it's this minute. That after some high level meetings at Knesset 11 years ago today, 11 years ago, 3 days ago actually, we were walking out, and my friend, my colleague, Rabbi Robin Fryer Bodson, who's now a rabbi in Toronto, we looked up to the sky and we saw, after an alarm had just gone off, a puff of smoke and then a very loud sound. And we realized that the Iron Dome defense system had knocked out a rocket right over our heads. Every time I think back to that moment, I'm right there in that moment again. So sharing with you, friends, that's where I am, myself. And I came back to Berkeley soon afterwards, where I was serving as a pulpit rabbi, and there were people who had denied that anything had happened. Obviously, trauma informs the way someone tells a story, but the facts on the ground were indisputable. 11 years ago today. 11 years ago today, because I just returned from this experience and was writing a lot about it, I was invited to be part of a program on NPR hosted by Michael Krasny. Some of you might know, it's called Forum. And I was invited to be there with other speakers, and I had hoped to be able to speak with them. They included someone whose name you probably don't know. His name is Hatem Bazian, and he is a faculty member at UC Berkeley. I don't know if he still is, and he's a leader and has been for a long time of a lot of the Palestinian protest movements, and this was 2014. And I knew then that Michael Krasny, the host, had invited both of us, and he was going to invite us one after the other to be interviewed. And I had hoped that we would be able to be in the same room. This is 11 years ago, friends, and I hope you can hear the intentions of 11 years ago. And they lead directly into at least the recollection for today. I wrote the night before the interview to Hatem, to Dr. Bazian, and I shared online. This is the letter I wrote to Dr. Bazian. I pray we have the opportunity to stand together and reject the worldview that suggests we can't see the divine in each other's eyes. So this is what I wrote to him. Dear Dr. Bazian, we are scheduled to be on NPR together tomorrow morning. Rather, we're scheduled to speak one after the other on the situation in Israel/Palestine. I wish that we had been invited to share a conversation together about our feelings, and so that we could talk to each other instead of framing that suggests we can't even speak to each other. Perhaps when the session is over, you and I could connect over coffee once Ramadan is over. I cherish the opportunity to forge a friendship with you and bring some people together in peaceful conversation. With respect, Menachem. I remember writing that letter. I remember hoping that there was a way for us to get past all this. And I actually wrote a poem just before going on. And obviously the trip that I had just been on, the pain in Israel in 2014 in the summer, with hundreds of missiles being fired from Gaza into southern Israel. I wrote this poem, Why Do I Tremble? Just before the interview. Sitting here, cup of coffee trembling in hand, I reflect, why do I tremble? I'm not under threat, am I? Am I? My brother, my sister, my mother, my daughter, my son, they'll be fine, won't they? How I speak today is only words, isn't it? An interview doesn't save anyone. couldn't change anything, could it? We'll be safe. We'll be fine, won't we? Oh, that's why. I wrote all of this 11 years ago today. These were the experiences that I had. And I listened when Hatam was in the studio before I was. I was in the green room waiting my turn. And I remember, like it is right now, listening to the interview where Michael Krasny asked Hatem Bazian, when will the rockets stop? And you might not remember this. This was the first time we had heard about tunnels being dug really into southern Israel under the wall. They'd kidnapped soldiers. And we talked about tunnels then. So Michael asked Hatem, when will the tunnels and rockets stop? 2014. And Hatem Bazian said, when the occupation ends. And Michael, who thank God knew his history, said, Israel withdrew unilaterally from Gaza in 2005. There is no occupation in Gaza. And Hatem Bazian said, when the occupation of 1948 ends, that's when the rockets and tunnels will end. My innocence took a severe hit, maybe ended, in that sentence. And obviously, I didn't know anything. October 7th of 2023 changed me. It changed so many of us in profound ways, and the trembling has also changed. I'm going to share a little bit more. Because it turns out, we learned last year, that Hatem Bazian in Berkeley is the person who organized all of what is known as JVP, Jewish Voice for Peace, which means that that language, Jewish Voice for Peace, isn't coming from the Jewish community, even though there are many Jews fighting for peace, as there always have been and always should be. Even those I viscerally disagree with are painting a picture of a beautiful world that I know should be, that I pray for. I don't only pray for peace for Jews or for the state of Israel. That's not what it is to be a Jew. My obligation is to be someone who pursues peace. We praise Aaron the high priest for being Ohev Shalom V'Rodef Shalom. And how do you do that? How can I do that? How can we do that? When there's so much undermining, physical undermining of our home and metaphysical undermining of our hearts, by those who are granted platforms to speak, to organize. And it's taken how long for universities to acknowledge that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and that they have failed, abjectly failed, in protecting Jewish students on campus and allowing there to be a conflation between free speech and hatred? I say all of this not to build a case, because I don't have to. As Fabrice was just sharing, and I send my love to you, my friend, to you and the community in France in particular, where 50 French Jewish campers were not just kicked off a flight, but their camp director, who was on the airplane with them, was beat up and handcuffed. And those doing the handcuffing and the kicking off of these Jewish campers, even if, by the way, the campers were as rowdy as I know campers can be, those officials of the airline said, Israel is a terrorist country. And as Fabrice shared a moment ago, there were shots fired outside of a synagogue in France, and it's not the first time in recent weeks that such a thing has happened. And physical violence and verbal violence and hatred out in the open is not only in France. You can just look for stories and you won't have to look far. It's not like we are without power to respond. But what becomes clear to me, in a way that is frankly devastating, when I actually pay attention to what, again speaking personally, I have had to learn, means that I can't only look for the good parts of the Parshiot. I can't only look at the good parts of the Torah portions. And I think it's important to have the discussion as a Jewish community about the difference between justice and vengeance. But I know where these feelings come from. I do. I read this verse, I'll read it again. I began the conversation today with it. It says in chapter 31, verse 2 of the book of Numbers, in this week's Torah portion, Nikum nikmat b'nei Israel me'eta midyanim. Seek vengeance, vengeance of the children of Israel from the Midianites. Achar te'asef elamecha. Only afterward will you be gathered to your kinspeople. Now I am grateful for the work we still must do and the work we do to build interfaith friendships. I've been gratified to have real and bearing conversations with non-Jewish clergy about how difficult this is. Often they come with not enough information about the history of Israel, the partition plan, the Balfour Declaration, not just current anti-Semitism, but where history comes from, and that the leadership of Hamas has never been for the sake of the Palestinian people on the ground. It has only been for the destruction of my family. I saw in my reviewing of memories that, my writing, I just kept on writing and speaking and teaching and about the experience in 2014. Someone who thought they were insulting me wrote a piece about this allegedly progressive rabbi talking about me, who fights against gun violence and for racial justice, which were and are causes I am devoted to supporting: gun violence prevention and all sorts of things that get lumped into the notion of what it is to be progressive, but it's actually human rights and a liberal worldview and Torah that leads me to care about every human being's safety and welfare. I'm not going to stop doing those things. These are gratifying. But this person who thought they were insulting me said, this rabbi used the quote, "We will do what we must to protect ourselves." Well, frankly, this person said, frankly, that's Zionist. Well, let me be very clear. That person used a word that I consider praise. And so often, friends, we misunderstand Zionism, and in public discourse, we have continued to misuse and misunderstand the word Zionism. Anyone who understands Zionism as supremacy is simply not paying attention, doesn't know history, and knows nothing about Zionism, certainly knows nothing about Jews. Those officials on the airplane are part of the problem. And the children that they hurt, and their teacher who was beat up and handcuffed in front of them, was assaulted for the crime of being a Jew. The kids were singing Hebrew songs, and that's what they were hurt for. Well, I have a suggestion, friends. Let's sing Hebrew songs. Let's remind the world that Zionism is simply the right of Jews to have a place on earth, to have full human dignity. Anyone who disagrees with that is definitely an anti-Semite. It should be clear to everyone that there are not only honest conversations happening, there are manipulative things being done to undermine the possibilities of Jewish dignity. And because of that, innocents suffer. Innocent Jews, innocent others suffer. I don't long for the fulfillment of this verse that I keep on looking at, because I don't long for vengeance. I learn from the unfolding narrative of the Jewish people, this larger notion of Torah, that vengeance, it doesn't lead towards peace, and only peace leads toward a better world for my children and for anyone else's. We must, and Fabrice is sharing, that the children's phones were confiscated. We must make sure to document all of this. And just as I said earlier, I can't only look at the verses that feel good. I wouldn't be a good rabbi. I wouldn't be an authentic Jew. I wouldn't be a student of Torah if I only looked at the good stuff. And I'm also called to be my children's protector and our people's champion, just like you are. Friends, I invite you, even though what I want to do is offer comfort and inspiration, and I do want that for us and for everyone. I want that for everyone in Gaza. I want them to have everything they need. I have always wanted everyone in Gaza to have everything they need. Who's doing the crying right now, trying to get people in Gaza all the food they need? Jews. Jews. Look at what the Torah tells us we have to do when we are attacked. We have to attack back. And look what we're trying not to do. And our children who sing our songs, are living what the Torah is responding to. I'm going to work hard, and I hope you will too, to not let vengeance fester in our soul. But I will not close my eyes, and I hope you won't either. The pernicious undermining of our home and of our hearts requires response. Some of that can be done with building relationships with clergy of different faiths, making friendships and alliances everywhere we can. And some of that is going to be what, I don't often quote Max Nordau, who was an early political Zionist, but he created a term, it's in German, called Muscular Judaism, which means we have to become muscular Jews. We have to be strong. I pray we don't need to use our muscles that much, but we have to be strong because there are moments like this one where we have to be strong. We have to be vulnerable enough to remember who we are. We can't become so brittle and so reactive that we forget the rest of the Torah. But we can't, on the other side of that, become blinded to the reality that is dangerous for us. We must teach, yes. Chrysolina, I don't know that we've met, but I agree with you. We have to do a better job educating others about the history of Israel. It's true. We have to educate ourselves too. And so, I recommend, friends, if you're looking for a good book, buy Yossi Klein Halevi's book, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor, the second edition. Just imagine the good we could do if we could truly have those conversations where we don't leave our own truths behind. We tell our story. We include our trauma. To return to that moment 11 years ago today, where I heard someone who was supposed to be a fellow panelist say, when the reality of the state of Israel is undone, that's when we'll stop attacking. No. 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 This Parsha has some hard truths. I'd rather not let them in. But it's our job to know our own story and to tell it, even and especially when it hurts. We have inner problems to fix. We have external threats to end. We'll do both. That's how strong we've become. That's who we're called to be. When we sing Hatikva, there are times we sing it with gritted teeth. There are times we sing it with tears in our eyes. Recently, by which I mean every day of the last 657 and many times before that, when I sing Hatikva, I feel all of my ancestors pounding in my heart. I remember standing in Yad Vashem and hearing Jews in Bergen-Belsen singing Hatikva. I remember Jews 2 years ago standing every Saturday night singing Hatikva. And in both cases, and in this one, friends, Od lo avda tikvatenu. We have not lost our hope. I'm going to ask you to say those words to yourself before we sing Hatikva today. Od lo avda tikvatenu. We have not lost our hope. We've grown stronger through time. As strong as we have to be. We want our children home. We want our grandparents home. We want our sisters and our brothers home. We want them home now. And we will bring them home now. That's how strong we have to be too. Hold it all, friends. Hold yourself strong. Let's sing. Kolon balevav pnima nefesh Yehudi homia ulefate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia. Od lo avda tikvatenu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liot am chofshi be'artzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Liot am chofshi be'artzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Bring them home now. Am Yisrael Chai. See you tomorrow, my friends.